West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Welcome back to State of the Union. The January 6th committee is set to release its report next month, but some staff say it may not represent all their findings. Sources told the Washington Post that they felt Republican Congresswoman Liz Cheney was only interested in evidence that pertained to former President Trump, which prompted a fiery response from a spokesperson for Cheney and also one from the committee. Here with me now to discuss January 6th and a lot of other issues is a member of that committee, Democrat Adam Schiff. Thank you so much for coming in. Let's start with that Post report, which was a really remarkable report. Staffers were told the final January 6th report would likely almost entirely focus on Donald Trump, potentially leaving out a significant amount of your committee's report and investigation in other areas. That's what the Post said. Is it true?
No. I mean, I certainly hope not. I would like to see our report be as broad and inclusive as possible. We are discussing as a committee among the members what belongs in the body of the report, what belongs in the appendices of the report, what is beyond the scope of our investigation. And we'll reach those decisions, in a collaborative manner. I think that one of the things that has made our committee so successful is we have worked extremely well together. That doesn't mean we always agree on everything, but it does mean we have a lot of respect for each other and we get to the goal, which is providing the American people with a full accounting of what took place on January 6th.
That has certainly been the public perception of it and the public face of the committee, but it sounds like there's a different story, at least in some parts of the committee behind the scenes. I mean, Liz Cheney's spokesman put out a statement accusing staffers on that very committee, on her own committee, of trying to slip, quote, liberal biases into the report. Here's what this quote said, that Cheney won't sign on to any narrative that suggests Republicans are inherently racist or smears men and women in law enforcement or suggests every American who believes God has blessed America is a white supremacist. And then a committee spokesman accused disgruntled staffers of, quote, cowardice and said they're helping Donald Trump and others responsible for the violence of January 6th. Those are remarkable statements.
They are. I don't think the back and forth is particularly helpful to the committee, and I don't want to engage in it. We're going to get to a consensus on the report. We're very close to that now. We're close to the putting down the pen and going to print. And I think the report is going to set out in a, I hope, very comprehensive way what took place, what led to that attack, and all the circumstances around that. We're also going to be releasing the evidence, which may be the most important thing. The voluminous transcripts, the documents and emails. We want to make sure that that's put before the American people. We certainly don't want the Jim Jordans of the world to cherry pick anything not disclosed and make a false or misleading narrative out of it. So the country's going to have the evidence. They're going to have our report. And I'm enormously proud of what we've done and know I'll be proud of the final result.
Well, I was going to ask you about that. Jim Jordan has already said that he will be the chairman of the Judiciary Committee. He is going to go through the evidence you left out. You're saying that there won't be evidence that will not be made public.
The evidence will all be made public. Now, we'll have to make sure that we scrub that evidence for personally identifiable information, that the evidence that we provide protects people's security, it doesn't put them at risk. So there are things that we're going to have to do along those lines. But yes, we want to put the evidence before the American people, which supports the hearings that we've done, as well as the report that we'll put out, and will be a comprehensive picture.
A few weeks after January 6th, you said the attack on the Capitol was, quote, a massive intelligence and security failure that needs to be fully investigated. There were 9 public hearings. None had a specific focus on exactly that, on the security and intelligence failures. Will those be detailed in the final report?
I certainly hope they will, and I'm advocating for that. I think that's part of the broad picture of why the Capitol was vulnerable to attack, what intelligence we had, what intelligence we missed, what intelligence was put before law enforcement.
Are you meeting resistance on getting that into?
I don't want to go into our internal discussions. I think we'll get to common agreement. Part of it is, what belongs in the body of the report, what belongs in the separate appendices, what can be corroborated. We want to make sure that we have every fact nailed down. That's been part of the reason our committee has been so successful, and we want it to continue to be.
I want to move on, but before I do, there does seem to be tension surrounding the vice chair of the committee, Liz Cheney. One former staffer told the Washington Post that people working for the committee became, quote, discouraged when they felt it had become a, quote, Cheney 2024 campaign. Is that fair?
I've never viewed it that way, and I think her role on the committee has been indispensable. I have tremendous respect for her and for Adam Kinzinger. They've shown a lot of courage and backbone, something in very short supply in the GOP these days. So the committee would not have been the same without both of their participation, and I have nothing but respect for both of them.
As you well know, the man who was trying to be Speaker, Republican Kevin McCarthy, says that he wants to kick you off the Intelligence Committee, the committee that you now chair, because of your handling of the Trump-Russia investigation, and specifically that you repeatedly asserted that there was direct evidence of direct collusion, which didn't materialize. What's your response to McCarthy?
Well, McCarthy apparently doesn't think it's collusion if your campaign manager is giving inside polling data and battle strategy in key states to an agent of Russian intelligence while the Russians are helping your campaign. But most Americans would call that collusion. McCarthy's problem is not with what I've said about Russia. McCarthy's problem is he can't get to 218 without Marjorie Taylor Greene and Paul Gosar and Matt Gaetz. And so he will do whatever they ask. And right now they're asking for me to be removed from my committees, and he's willing to do it. He's willing to do anything they ask. And that's the problem. Kevin McCarthy has no ideology. He has no core set of beliefs. It's very hard not only to get to 218 that way, it's even more difficult to keep 218. That's his problem. So he will misrepresent my record. He'll misrepresent Derek Swalwell or Ilhan Omar, whatever he needs to do to get the votes of the QAnon caucus within his conference.
He's not the only one. The incoming oversight chair, James Comer, told Punchbowl News in an interview, I don't believe congressional investigations have a whole lot of credibility now. I blame Adam Schiff for that, but it's also both parties to blame for investigations in the past. I want to change that. What's your response?
Well, Comer doesn't believe in the Russian investigation. He doesn't believe in the Ukraine investigation. He doesn't believe in the investigation of January 6th. And why? Because those were investigations of the serial abuse of power by Donald Trump. And Comer and Jordan and McCarthy will do nothing but carry Donald Trump's water. Someone, as you point out, who's sitting down for dinner with anti-Semites, who's sitting down for dinner with bigots, who won't condemn them. This is who they're making common cause with, and so they will do and they will say what they need to get along with Donald Trump.
We're out of time, but I just have to ask, if you are subpoenaed by Republicans when they take over, will you comply?
We'll have to consider the validity of the subpoena, but I would certainly view my obligation, the administration's obligation, to follow the law, and the fact that they have disrespected the law is not a precedent I would hope that would be broadly followed. But we'll have to look at the legitimacy or lack of legitimacy of what they do.
It is Monday, the 28th of November of 2022, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner the English Bulldog is our snoozing sous chef, and our daily special is River City Hash Mondays, and you know what that means. Yes, you do. And it was a very long holiday weekend, and quiet around here, which was quite nice. I did mention, I believe, that my brother-in-law and sister had to go to Portland for another procedure on his brain, and hopefully he's been in a bit of discomfort, so we're hoping that what they had done will alleviate that once again. And so they stayed at their house and just had it fairly quiet, and we went to my nephew's and niece-in-law, I think that would be, niece-in-law. Went to their house with the kids, and it was quite nice and very quiet. Came home with some food, which I turned into a gourmet delight when I got here. Well, reconstituted. Made just I like to call it a simple turkey stew. But simple usually means like no more than 3 ingredients. Well, there were more than that. Just so a little bit more complex than simple. But there you go. And now that's done. I made a little quiche yesterday to sort of honor a Sunday. And I got to tell you, it felt like Sunday from Friday on. I don't know what it was. Maybe it was because it was rather dark around here because of the weather. And we did get some bit of sun, but not the amount of rain that I had anticipated that we would get. Though it has come now, and it is lightly falling, and we'll get more into the weather later on. But it is lightly falling, and actually we're expecting a bit more today, a little bit of a respite tomorrow, and then the active winter advisory that we are currently under will no longer be an advisory. It'll be a statement of fact. Okay. It'll be a snowy mix. I always like that. Not a rainy mix. A snowy mix. Okay. So the usual suspects, they're at it, aren't they? Yep, meeting up with fascists for dinner. I call them full-blown Nazis. I think that Fuentes guy is like, full KKK Nazi type. And Trump is reduced to pretty much exclaiming that he did not have David Duke relations with that Fuentes man. I did not. I had no idea who he was. Think about that for one moment. Now, I know that Mar-a-Lago, you can just walk in off the street. But do you think for a minute that somebody would be able to sit down with Donald Trump with the security detail of Secret Service agents that he has right now would get through? He knew, okay? But he's a liar. He also lied about David Duke, didn't he? And then let's go to the tape, as they used to say. And, but he still said, I never said that. Or he just ignores it. And people believe it. They really do. And so here we have this massive corruption. It's just so blatant, too. That's the thing that really, I got to tell you, sort of bothers me. But it's all part of a whole. The corruption's so blatant because it's another way to kick the libs. That's all they care about. It's so juvenile, isn't it? Well, they're juvenile delinquents, pretending that they are the adults in the room. That's what is the other, kick the libs. By turn, we're like the mommy state, and then turn it around and we're like, you're just a bunch of unruly brats. Get off my lawn. Yeah, well, it should be drought tolerant anyway, Gramps. Okay. So I have seen this rightward turn that we've been taking for quite some time. Marjorie Taylor Greene is now accusing corporations of being communist. Can you believe that? I mean, it's just like an utter misunderstanding about what communism is. And I don't think there's a corporate structure that really incorporates communism. Now, we know that she can look at China and say, oh, well, they're communists and look at their economic state. It's like capitalist. Yeah, it isn't it? It seems that way, doesn't it? But you can't really call China communist. Not really. It's some sort of weird hybrid thing. I'm just saying. Though when they get into, I don't know, the Maoist philosophy of when we have a crackdown to quarantine people, we're going to weld them into their high-rises, and then when the high-rises burn, there's no way to get out. And I suppose the powers that be will go, well, at least the virus won't jump from that. Which is actually scary thinking that people would think like that, but people do. And it's not just in China where leaders of a very cynical bent think that way. No. So, Donald Trump sat down with Fuentes. And he sat down with who? Oh, Kanye. Very troubled young man who just happens to be black, is what Trump said. Oh, really? I see. And though no one talks about Stephen Miller being there, who's like come on, that guy's a total white nationalist from the get-go. Let's not forget him. Didn't know who Fuentes was. All right. And then, in the midst of all this, you have Elon Musk, chaos agent. And I don't know if we're getting smart about this, if you get my drift. Missed it by that much. But this chaos agent seems to feel that he's rich enough that he can just hostile take over a social media platform that was the de facto, World Commons town square. Get rid of that. You got Sachs, Thiel, and Musk getting together and saying, what are we going to do? Well, let's attack their information hub. The place where they have community. Because, they think we're all just a bunch of mud people anyway, and they're the exalted. Yeah, Musk is into this cultic idea that, the richer you are, the more kids you have because of some sort of genetic superiority, and you got to spread it around to save the world. I likened Elon Musk to Lex Luthor, and people reminded me that Lex Luthor was a lot more intelligent and smart than Elon Musk. And it's true, because you don't have to be intelligent. You don't have to have really much of any qualities to succeed in business. Being a bully, I think, is what you need to be to become like these billionaires for the most part. And don't think for 1 minute that Warren Buffett's not a bully when he needs to be. I'm just saying. Maybe he is the wise, quiet sage of wherever, the Midwest, that he hails from. Maybe. Now, I admit this is anecdotal, but my experience is that a lot of times the more of a bully and a dick you are, the more money you can accumulate because you're able to part dollars from other people without any feeling of guilt. Like, maybe I shouldn't have acted that way. People who succeed in business can't afford to think that way. As my maggot brother told me long ago, and he's the baby in the family, and I just sort of I don't know, I can't agree with that. But he essentially said that you can't fall in love with anything because everything is for sale. And I said, everything? He goes, everything. I thought, well, that's a weird way to approach human relationships. I'm not falling in love with you because I might be able to make some money off of you. And if I'm trying to make some money off you, if I have any feelings for you, I might not be able to make any money off of you. And I said, well, that's kind of like the point, isn't it? And that's why in real estate, there's a difference between a house and a home. A house, you're going to sell. A home you love so much that you don't want to leave, and it's priceless. So I don't know. Some people just don't want to be in a home, I guess. And then they think that no one else should either because of the way they are. And I think that that is a gross misunderstanding of how it is to live in America. And I don't know where the failure came about. Maybe in our schools. Because somewhere along the line, or I don't know, is it the schools or is it nurtured somewhere else? I think it's been nurtured somewhere else because when you think of or look at the efforts that the right wing has put in place, really since even before World War II, and the right that we think of now and what it has become, I don't see a equal group on our side that the group that's now bannered about in this 1984 Goldstein Antifa Goldstein. Oh my God. There's always been Oceania. Always. So I just don't see it. I mean, we look at all of the right-wing violence that has occurred and the murders and the assassinations. And I'm like, okay, like one guy died in an Antifa thing and it was he that did it to himself. The perp accidentally killed himself. That's the only death in terms of I think he was planning a bomb or something, some stupid ass thing. Don't do that. Then you got this other side, bombing abortion clinics, killing doctors in their churches, walking in on prayer meetings, having a nice little chat, then killing a bunch of elderly people. Going into a synagogue, killing a bunch of people, going into a Walmart, killing a bunch of people, going into schools, killing a bunch of people, etc., etc., etc. Going into gay clubs, killing a bunch of people, going into women's clinics and killing a bunch of people, going into libraries, killing a bunch of people. It's not Antifa. Merry Savage Christmas, as we used to say back in the day. All right. Well, I'm not having a Christmas truce with these Nazis, and I'm not singing O Silent Night, and I'm not singing O Tannenbaum either. Don't negotiate with Nazis or terrorists, all right? You don't. History proves that when you do, it will be at your detriment every time. That's why, this threat of taking Adam Schiff and others off of the Intel Committee doesn't really smack of a democratic process. The only reason Marjorie Taylor Greene was not allowed on the Oversight Committee, essentially stripped of her committee credentials, is because she is an insurgent who refused to leave her gun out of the chamber of the Congress. Let's not forget that. That was an affront on her rights to come in and intimidate people with her gun. And she wouldn't have been alone either. Unless people put their foot down, and now they're going to get back. Now we get to get back. Elections have consequences, and when you put your finger on the scale, it means that we have to work even harder to overcome the finger on the scale. I'm not saying it's our fault. I'm just saying it ain't over till it's over. I'm not leaving Twitter until the very end. I am part of the resistance. I'll go down with the ship. Nope. I'll jump over the rail, but not until the end. And same with America. It's hard for me to think about becoming an expatriate. Yeah, I've thought about it. It's nice for a fictional story. Semi-autobiographical. I've traveled around. Pretended I was an expatriate for a few weeks. Haven't we all? Nah. Back in the day, I was in a bit of a quandary. I would not have gone to Canada to escape the draft. I don't know. Conscientious objector, I wouldn't have flown too much. I got lucky, ultimately, on two fronts. My lottery number was a high number in the mid upper 200s, and they were only going with like the first 180, I suppose, if I remember correctly. But also my sports injuries kept me off of the battlefield. So I like to say no decent military would accept me, and so I went into public service in other ways, volunteering at suicide crisis hotlines, that sort of thing. Caring for the elderly when I was barely out of my teens. I thought if guys were going over there getting blown up, I should at least, put in some service here. I gotta tell you, I didn't get 3 squares and a cot. I would have probably made a lot more money going into the military. Starting off. But no. I don't see the same resolve of what it is to be an American on the other side, because they have no idea, because they're selfish and they think everything is being taken from them. If someone gets a right, it means a right is taken away from them, and that is not how it works in America. I suppose the push to keep civics from being taught in our schools had something to do with that, I would think. And everything else, too. They don't even want you to learn math now because people might add things up. Yeah, we've added them up for quite a while. Speaking of quite a while, I've been going on for quite a while, and it is after the holiday, and I'm going to babble. So I have. And let us now collect ourselves in the royal we, as I like to say. And attend to the curated part of the show, which we have curated for you. And I already mentioned about Adam Schiff firing back on McCarthy. So on the rest of the menu here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, River City Hash Mondays. Whole Foods' decision to stop selling Maine lobster has divided environmentalists, politicians, and fishermen, because I guess there's two groups there that wonder why we have to save 340 whales before they go extinct. Because there's only 340 of them. Anyway, California regulators approved $1 billion for the new heavy-duty truck EV charging project. And a federal judge denied a bid for a new trial in the Whitmer kidnapping case. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where 2 Iranian-born Swedish brothers went on trial in Stockholm, charged with spying for Russia for a decade. And U.S. soccer briefly scrubbed the Islamic Republic emblem from the Iran flag at the World Cup in support of the protests for women's rights. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. To the right of the page is the chat room link monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly. Across from the chat room link near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com is the link to our Patreon site. And please become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio. If you could afford to send us what you might spend on an espresso-type coffee drink once a month, it really does help us pay our bills. So please do. Please. And thank you to those of you who have been so generous over these many years in helping us fulfill our civic duty as the founders originally intended so many, many, many years ago. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter while we still have it, you can do so at Netroots Radio. Thank you, Tom, for taking care of that. And I guess we'll be migrating to other platforms, but we're still there. We'll see how it shakes out. Anyway, you can also follow me on Twitter while we still have it, at Justice Putnam. I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Kos about 10 minutes before showtime, and you can find those show notes and links on my Twitter feed while we still have it. Follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West, and pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, and really wherever podcasts can be found. All right, let's get right into this since time's a-flying. And this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy River City Hash Mondays is by Patrick Whittle of the Associated Press. Environmental groups are once again at odds with politicians and fishermen in New England in the wake of a decision by high-end retail giant Whole Foods to stop selling Maine lobster. Whole Foods recently said it will stop selling lobster from the Gulf of Maine at hundreds of its stores around the country. The company cited decisions by a pair of sustainability organizations to take away their endorsements of the U.S. lobster fishing industry. The organizations, the Marine Stewardship Council and Seafood Watch, both cited concerns about risks to rare North Atlantic right whales from fishing gear. Entanglement in gear is one of the biggest threats to the whales. The decision by Whole Foods was an important action to protect the highly endangered whale, said Virginia Carter, an associate with the Save America's Wildlife Campaign at Environmental America Research and Policy Center. With fewer than 340 North Atlantic right whales in existence, the species is swimming toward extinction unless things turn around, Carter said. Whole Foods said in a statement last week that it is monitoring the situation and committed to working with suppliers, fisheries, and environmental advocacy groups as it develops. The company's decision to stop selling lobster drew immediate criticism in Maine, which is home to the U.S.'s largest lobster fishing industry. The state's governor, Janet Mills, a Democrat, and its 4-member congressional delegation said in a statement that the Marine Stewardship Council's decision to suspend its certification of Gulf of Maine lobster came despite years of stewardship and protection of whales by Maine fishermen. Despite this, the Marine Stewardship Council, with retailers following suit, wrongly and blindly decided to follow the recommendations of misguided environmental groups rather than science, Mills and the delegation said. Whole Foods was not the first retailer to take lobster off the menu over sustainability concerns. HelloFresh, the meal kit company, was among numerous retailers to pledge to stop selling lobster in September after California-based Seafood Watch placed American and Canadian lobster fisheries on its red list of seafoods to avoid. Nikolusky of the Los Angeles Times brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The California Public Utilities Commission has approved a $1 billion vehicle electrification charging project, with most of the money earmarked to accelerate the number of mid-size and heavy-duty trucks on the state's roads. Some 70% of the funds will go to charging medium and heavy-duty vehicles, which combine to account for a disproportionate amount of greenhouse gas emissions in the transportation sector. Costs of the 5-year program will be spread out among utility ratepayers across California. It is the highest priority, Commissioner Clifford Rechtschaffen said. We have very stringent state goals established by the Air Resources Board to electrify medium and heavy-duty trucks, and they need charging infrastructure in order to electrify their fleets. The remaining 30% will go to charging light-duty electric vehicles at or near multi-unit dwellings. The program places a priority on low-income and tribal areas, with 65% of the funds going to underserved communities. No money is allocated for building EV charging infrastructure at individual homes. The program will start in 2025 and run through 2029, with $200 million allocated each year through the state's utilities. Money will be given back to customers in the form of rebates. Staff brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, River City Hash Mondays. A federal judge has denied a new trial request by two men convicted of conspiring to kidnap Michigan's Democratic Governor Gretchen Whitmer. Lawyers for Adam Fox and Barry Croft Jr. alleged misconduct by a juror and unfairness by U.S. District Judge Robert Jonker following their conviction by a federal jury in August. Jonker, in a written ruling Friday, shot down claims of juror misconduct and said he found no constitutional violation or credible evidence to convene a new hearing. Fox and Croft face up to life in prison when they're sentenced on December 28. Whitmer, who was re-elected on November 8th to a second term, was never physically harmed in the plot, which led to more than a dozen arrests in 2020. Fox and Croft's first trial ended in a mistrial earlier this year when the jury was unable to come to a unanimous verdict. A motion for a third trial was filed in September. Defense lawyers said a juror seated in the second trial was described by a co-worker as far left-leaning, was eager to get on the jury, and poised to convict before hearing evidence. The defense team's investigator said he interviewed two co-workers who said they had heard about it but had no first-hand knowledge. A third person declined to speak to him in the parking lot. That's right. If you're left, you have to be left out. Okay. Well, I suppose if you feel you can only be judged by a jury of your peers and your peers are a bunch of crooks with fascist leanings, there you go. All right, let us now go to our break, and when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening grassrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. This week, The Mighty Pen. Me Too is such a common refrain these days that it's hard to remember that its popularization is a very recent phenomenon. It was just in 2017, in fact, when the New Yorker and New York Times led the way with exposés on Hollywood producer and, as it turned out, chronic sexual predator Harvey Weinstein, a.k.a. the guy who, along with his brother, founded the film powerhouse Miramax. She Said is based on the book of the same name by Times journalists Megan Twohey and Jodi Kantor. The duo is played here by Carey Mulligan and Zoe Kazan, respectively, and it follows just how exactly the story developed. If this sounds a bit like another movie, Spotlight, about Boston Globe journalists exposing child sex abuse by priests in the area's Catholic diocese, that's probably intentional and not in a bad way. Both procedurals focus on powerful men preying on the vulnerable and show how other influential actors helped to cover it up for decades. She Said makes it abundantly clear that Weinstein couldn't have gotten away with his behavior had it not been for a phalanx of help, unwitting and otherwise, including accountants, DAs, and Hollywood executives who said nothing for the sake of their careers. Speaking against Weinstein never ended well, and the less powerful the people trying were, like up-and-coming actors or staff, the less successful they were, to the point of derailed careers. She Said is a smartly done and easy-to-follow picture and sends a message about strength in numbers, the power of journalists, and the need to believe women in general. It also makes clear how tedious investigative journalism can be, with potentially fatal setbacks always threatening the project. Here, though, the truth does prevail, and for that alone, She Said is worth a look. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Christopher Intagliata. Hundreds of miles southeast of New Zealand, you'll find the windswept Bounty and Antipodes Islands. It's there you'll find the breeding grounds of what may be the world's most punk rock penguin, which sports twin bleached blonde mohawks.
So it's like if you took a penguin and you put its flipper in an electricity outlet and it got a shock. That's what you might imagine it looks like.
Lloyd Davis of New Zealand's University of Otago says the erect-crested penguin, as it's known, also has a peculiar breeding strategy. The females lay 2 eggs, but generally leave the first one to die.
They just plop the egg down on the rock, and it's just bizarre to see. And then 40% of them, they just turn their back on it. They don't even attempt to incubate it. They just like, I don't care about that.
Davis says that's unusual because most birds pour resources into the first egg and the second and however many more, but the last egg is almost an afterthought.
The final egg just acts like an insurance policy for them, so that if they lose one of the other eggs, then they can rear the chick from that one. But this is quite the opposite, because in this case, and this is why it's such a conundrum in the biological world, is that they don't favor the first egg, they favor the second one.
Davis and his colleagues traveled to the Antipodes Islands in 1998 to investigate that conundrum. And in reanalyzing their data, they've narrowed down the possible explanations for the behavior. For one, they think the penguins might reject that first egg because it forms while the birds are migrating. So it's smaller, inferior perhaps, to the second, larger egg. And the penguins may also be acknowledging a reality many species face. They simply don't have the resources to raise 2 kids. The results are in the journal PLOS ONE. Davis says when he visited the islands almost 25 years ago, the penguins were the least studied penguins in the world. He says they still are, and now they're endangered.
They seem to have gone down about 1/3 of their population based on the evidence that we have, and yet we know nothing about them. We know nothing about the causes, and we need to do what we can to protect these wonderful and forgotten penguins.
After all, you could say the birds themselves are already putting all of their eggs in one basket. Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Christopher Intagliata.
He seems sorry.
We very clearly told him not to look up there.
I'm honestly impressed that he was able to do it.
Right? What, did he balance on that big chair?
Yeah, I mean, I guess he'll just know what his gifts are this year.
I really thought we had hidden them well.
If they can find their presents, they can find a gun.
911, what is your emergency?
Every day, 8 kids and teens are unintentionally killed or injured by loaded and unlocked guns. Learn how to make your home safer at endfamilyfire.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council and End Family Fire.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
Breaking news. After years of failed Republican efforts to uncover any proof of widespread voter fraud by Democrats, Republican Governor Ron DeSantis of Florida has found not one but 20 ineligible people casting ballots. Like Donald Trump and a gaggle of other GOP governors, DeSantis has used the phony bugaboo of an illegal voting epidemic as a political ploy to keep the true believers believing. They spend millions of taxpayer dollars on partisan wild goose chases, and DeSantis even created a new police bureaucracy, the Office of Election Crimes, to snoop on voters. It was all just silly political nastiness, but then, Ron's dragnet scooped up 20 of the diabolical culprits. Vindication. Who were they? All are former convicts who had previously been stripped of their right to vote, but each one unwittingly cast ballots in 2020, wrongly believing that their rights had been restored after serving their time. Who cares what they thought, bellowed the bullish governor. He trashed them as election criminals, ignoring their constitutional right to be presumed innocent unless convicted by a jury. Well, gosh, why did all 20 think they could vote? Because each one had properly submitted voter registration applications that went to DeSantis' state agency responsible for determining eligibility. But oops, Ron's own administration boo-booed, erroneously authorizing all 20 to get official voter ID cards. In short, the governor himself had effectively told them they could vote. Then he had them arrested and publicly condemned for doing so. This is Jim Hightower saying, now running for president, DeSantis says God has chosen him to rule because he's a fighter. But hello, he fights people rather than for them. He's a bully, and there's nothing godly about that. Nothing presidential either.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1891. That was the day the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers Union began in St. Louis, Missouri. At the time of the union's founding, the field of electrical work was very new. Linemen often risked their lives for their jobs. They worked on high power lines, sometimes as long as 12 hours a day. They worked in all sorts of weather, typically earning as little as 15 to 20 cents an hour. In 1890, an exposition was held in St. Louis to showcase a glorious display of electrical wonders. The exposition brought together electrical workers from throughout the United States. At the end of their work each day, the men would gather and talk. They shared stories of their hard work under dangerous and unsafe conditions. They decided it was time to form a union. They reached out to the American Federation of Labor. The AFL sent an organizer named Charles Castle to help them. Soon, local number 5221 of the Electrical Wiremen and Linemen's Union was established in St. Louis. But the men knew they had to reach beyond St. Louis. They elected lineman Harry Miller as their president. They then sent him traveling by railroad boxcar to cities like Indianapolis, Pittsburgh, New Orleans, and Milwaukee. Miller helped linemen in these cities organize their own local unions. Delegates from 10 locals, representing less than 300 members, gathered in St. Louis. It was there that they drafted a constitution and adopted a logo, the iconic image of a clenched fist holding 2 lightning bolts. And with that, the IBEW was born. Today, the union represents approximately 250,000 members and is a true spark for the labor movement. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, River City Hash Mondays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 43 degrees Fahrenheit, and we are expected to be much cooler than we were yesterday, and indeed, yes, we're only going to be at 42 today. So this is as good as it gets. Considerable cloudiness with occasional rain showers, and we have some light rain falling at the moment, though what we call light rain might be pretty heavy rain for everybody else. But the heavy rain is expected and bringing with it about a 20th of an inch, and then the winds will be out of the west at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Then mainly cloudy overnight with lows around 30. Winds light and variable. Partly cloudy skies during the morning hours will become overcast tomorrow in the afternoon, with highs once again around 42. Winds light and variable. And then expecting some overnight rain beginning late tomorrow night. Looks like pollen is still rated as none here in Rogue River proper. The air quality index for the region is in the good range at 35 parts per million, and that daytime UV index is low at level 1. Barometric pressure is falling at 29.99 inches. Visibility is at 7 miles, and relative humidity is at 93%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. London is 50 degrees and mostly cloudy. Paris is 51 and mostly cloudy. Rome is 56 and partly cloudy. Kyiv is 32 and cloudy. Kabul is 43 and clear. Hong Kong is 76 degrees and fair. Tokyo is 56 and cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 63 degrees and partly cloudy. San Francisco, California is 50 degrees and partly cloudy with a small craft advisory on the bay and offshore. And New York is 52 degrees Fahrenheit and mostly cloudy. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Staff at the Associated Press brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, River City Hash Mondays. 2 Iranian-born Swedish brothers were on trial in Sweden, charged with spying for Russia and its military intelligence service, GRU, for a decade. Payman Kia, age 42, and Payam Kia, age 35, appeared before the Stockholm District Court to face charges of having worked jointly to pass information to Russia between September 28th of 2011 and September 20th of 2021. Between 2014 and 2015, Payman Kia worked for Sweden's domestic intelligence agency, but also for the country's armed forces. Swedish prosecutors allege that the data they gave the Russians originated from several authorities within the Swedish Security and Intelligence Service, known by its acronym SAPO. Swedish media reported that Payman Kia worked for the Armed Forces Foreign Defense Intelligence Agency, known in Sweden by its acronym MUST, and worked with a top-secret unit within the agency that dealt with Swedish spies abroad. Intelligence experts told Swedish broadcaster SVT that even though many details remain unknown, it appeared to be one of the most damaging cases of espionage in Sweden's history because the men compiled a list of all the employees within SAPO. That alone is a big problem because Russian intelligence focuses on human resources, experts said. The material is the absolute most secret material available, prosecutor Mats Lundqvist told the court. It is an unusual trial in that a similar case has not appeared in Sweden for over 20 years. Payman Kia was arrested in September of 2021 and his brother in November of 2021. Both denied any wrongdoing. Payman Kia helped his brother and dismantled and broke a hard drive, which was later found in a trash can when his brother was arrested, according to the charge sheet. The naturalized Swedish citizens face sentences up to life imprisonment if convicted.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière, la promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
John Gambrell of the Associated Press brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The U.S. Soccer Federation briefly displayed Iran's national flag on social media without the emblem of the Islamic Republic, saying the move supported protesters in Iran ahead of the two nations' World Cup match tomorrow, Tuesday. Iran's government reacted by accusing America of removing the name of God from its national flag. The USSF decision added yet another political firestorm to the Middle East's first World Cup, one organizers had hoped would be spared of off-the-field controversies. It occurred as the U.S. prepared to face Iran in a decisive World Cup match already freighted by the decades of enmity between the countries and the nationwide protests challenging Tehran's theocratic government. The U.S. Soccer Federation said in a statement yesterday morning, Sunday, it decided to forego the official flag on social media accounts to show, quote, support for the women in Iran fighting for basic human rights, end quote. The Twitter account of the U.S. men's team displayed a banner with the squad's matches in the group stage with the Iranian flag only bearing its green, white, and red colors. The same was seen in a post on its Facebook and Instagram accounts, laying out the point total so far in its group. By Sunday afternoon, the normal flag with the emblem had been restored in the Twitter banner, and the Facebook and Instagram posts with the altered flag had been removed. The brief absence of the emblem came as months-long demonstrations challenged Iran's government following the September 16th death of 22-year-old Masha Amini, who had been detained by the country's morality police. Iran has not released casualty or arrest figures for months and alleges without providing evidence that the protests have been fomented by its enemies abroad, including the U.S. Tehran also restricts media access and has detained over 63 reporters and photographers since the demonstrations began, according to the Committee to Protect Journalists, making covering the unrest that much more difficult. Indeed. All right, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up here tomorrow for Terrytown Chowder Tuesdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks, and we will meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte coère. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair. T'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. De novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.